Welcome to the Real Life Groups Leadership Podcast, a conversation about creating small groups where people grow in spiritual maturity in relationship. We're focused on you, the small group leader, giving tips and tools to help you lead effectively. Well, I want to welcome you to today's episode of the Real Life Groups Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Short, and today we get the opportunity to sit with Andy Ubert and Riley Shields, both really the newest team on our group's staff at the Post Falls campus for Real Life. And the cool part for this conversation today, stages and seasons of a life group or a group, is that they are both kind of bringing in some new experience to our team. Thinking of Andy, who came from Minnesota and was leading a group for years, an elder at a church, and Riley, who was part of our middle school team overseeing middle school small groups. And so really excited for, as we talk about the different stages and seasons of a group, kind of the experience that they bring in. I thought it'd be fun actually to start us today with kind of the different stages that you see in the difference between middle schoolers and now being on the adult life group team.
Yes. They're different.
They are.
And I think it's a win going to the ADM team solely based on the smells.
Okay. Different smells.
Smells alone
Yeah.
for middle schoolers. It's new. They're growing. It's
Great.
They're in an early stage of development. So
Yes. A different
good.
stage that has some different realities in middle school.
yes, there's differences for sure. And I've appreciated not having to clean up anybody's puke or unclog a drain that someone stuck toilet paper in, or it's just different. Your time spent different ways.
Different stage, probably different messes for adults, right? So
Okay. That's true.
I'm excited to hear about that as we dive in here a little bit. And Andy, coming from Minnesota, I think there's a reality of some different seasons as you've come to North Idaho, being at our Post Falls campus here. Tell us about some of those differences.
Yeah, the main difference is that there are two seasons in Minnesota.
Okay. Tell us about
Extremely cold, a little bit of sun.
Okay.
Yeah.
So people complain about the North Idaho weather, and you're like,
Oh, that's summer.
Yeah.
That's summer back in Minnesota. Yeah. This is great. So
I love it.
Yeah.
That's really
It's
cool.
been a change, but a good one.
I have a question.
Sure.
I've never been to Minnesota. Don't know anything about Minnesota other than what you've shared. But what is a very Minnesotan phrase that you guys have?
Oh, one of my favorite that my family loves is when they're going to agree to something, they'd be like, "Oh yeah, sure, you betcha."
That is
it's a lot
great.
to just say like,
Oh yeah, sure, you betcha.
That sounds good.
Yeah.
Now, how do you say Minnesota? Like, I don't think we're saying it right.
No, we're not.
Oh, you're not. Minnesota.
Okay.
You gotta elongate that. Oh, Minnesota.
There's no A. Or it's like a
Well, Minnesota there is, but not if you're a Minnesotan.
Okay.
Minnesotan, Minnesota.
I've never even heard that word before. This isn't part of our discussion, but it's very fascinating. Welcome to the team.
Thank
Super
you.
excited
Glad
about
to be here.
this talk. And as we kind of kick off and talk about this whole conversation really starts with, I think in some ways, frustration for some groups, because as they think about, maybe they start really well, a group kicks off and there's excitement, but then groups they roll through different stages and seasons. There's just kind of reality to changing seasons, changing stages of a group. So that's kind of what we're talking about today. Would you say that's overall true, Riley?
Yes. I in the life of small groups, I think that there's definitely a lot of stages and seasons. As far as stages go, it kind of just depends on how long the group's been together in a lot of ways. If it's a newly formed group, the trust that's there is going to actually, it depends on the people for sure, but sometimes there's less trust within that group than there would be if the group is together for months or even years at that point.
Yep.
And so, there's just a lot of different. There's a lot of different stages that go into a small group, and inviting new people in changes that as well.
Yeah.
So a group can become stale if they don't invite new people in, So it just really depends on.
Yeah. So like different levels of depth, different levels of growth, the relational history. What else, Andy?
I would say like we talked about in the seasons. There are 4 distinct seasons here in North Idaho.
Yep.
And so
not in Minnesota, but in
not in
Idaho.
Minnesota, but
Okay.
here, yes. So you really have to be aware of that and how that changes group activities, group momentum, right? So just thinking of coming into summer, everybody's going to want to get out and enjoy the lakes, the rivers, right? And so planning for that that change intentionally is really important.
Yeah, I like that word, kind of intentionally, as we think about helping a group be prepared for what's coming up. And so let me ask it this way. Is the problem that we see a lot of groups just are kind of unaware that that's going to happen, Riley?
I think a lot of times that happens. I think what we say a lot is unclear expectations lead to frustrations. Yeah. And so when you have a group and you're going into a new season and you're not intentionally prepared for the potentially new season that you're walking into, sometimes the leaders can be frustrated because their people are disengaged, or the people in the group are frustrated because no one's on the same page. The expectations are not clear for the season. But I also think looking at the season that you're walking into, being prepared and being able to equip your people for whatever season they're in, but what they're also walking into is helpful long-term for that group.
That's super good. So as a leader, to be thinking ahead, again, about this idea of intentionality, to recognize that there legitimately are seasons, there are legitimately stages that a group goes through. So let's kind of switch gears from, we know it's a problem, there is a problem. So how would we help our group leaders that we're talking to, that we appreciate so much, be intentional, be even more intentional with leading their group in these different areas? Andy, what do you think?
I would say just knowing who your people are, where they're at spiritually, and help them, give them those next steps, but in the stages of the group, like a group dynamic specifically. So a group that's just forming is going to be more relational. They're going to be building the trust. We use terms forming, storming, norming, performing, right? Yeah. And each of those stages offers you different unique challenges that come along with it. So
that's really good. It's been a while since I've heard some of those terms. I think it's really helpful to think about. There just are different stages that groups are at. So let's talk about, with that, how do we help a group kind of move intentionally through the different maybe time frames or stages that they're in? What do you think about that, Riley?
I think a lot of it is just knowing your people and knowing where they're at, and just getting to know them as people outside of group. But I think we use the SCMD process, the Share, Connect, Minister, Disciple, just to kind of know where our people are at. And so for a leader who has a group, being able to pinpoint where their group is at, but then knowing how to potentially get them to the next stage so that they can walk them through that.
Yeah, keep going with that a little bit. Explain more about helping someone kind of move intentionally, because we think about the group as a whole, but then obviously a group is made up of individuals. How do we help them kind of move intentionally through those different stages of growth?
I think, again, the first step is just to knowing where they're at. And it's interesting when you have a group full of people, they could be all in different places. Totally. And as a leader, it is their responsibility just to help the next step, their people go to the next step. So I think conversation with them, knowing areas where they're reluctant or struggling, or just a sense of honesty from their people, I think helps a ton.
I love that. Well, it's just thinking real time for a group that I had. This is a few years ago, but we had started to introduce the topic of branching with our group, and I could almost like feel it in the room, because I thought they were at a stage that they weren't, and it was almost like a mutiny, right? It was like we like these people, and you can leave, but we're not going anywhere. It's kind of like that. And I think you're exactly right as we think about kind of knowing and having the awareness that I didn't have at that point to know, we got to probably prep it for a little bit. We need to talk about why our group does go through different stages. And we were still real early in the relational stage, and they were connected, but they weren't ready to move in towards more of a, we talk about share, connect, minister, disciple, SCMD. They weren't quite ready to see the next generation of discipleship. They were still in the connecting phase as a group. So, Andy, is this true from what you've seen in groups?
Definitely, yeah. It's definitely been my experience as well. Yeah.
So you've seen this. That's super good. So let's talk about, Andy, the different seasons that a group goes through.
Yes. Now, our groups don't end.
Yep.
They change seasons, right? Yep. Which is really important to remember. Like we talked about the local calendar, and summer's the big one, but even coming into Christmas, right? Because we have a lot of momentum from September into the holiday season, and coming out of that strong, like being intentional with gathering the people back together, getting that consistency is really important.
Yeah. So I hear a lot in this conversation of kind of about intentionality and awareness, that a group leader just needs to kind of be thinking of all the time. Where are my people at? What season are we at? Where are they at relationally? Kind of what stage is our group collectively at? So here's kind of the next piece. Riley, how would a group, a leader grow in this? What are some things that we would give them to kind of take a step?
Yeah, I think each leader is given a group's team. So Andy and I are actually partnered on the group's team. And so we are there as resources for them.
Yep.
We meet with them. We sit down. We try to explain just expectations for them. We also have different just tools that we use that we also give them because we are the leaders of them. But we have a lot of discipleship-focused training that we provide for them if they want to take that step. We highly encourage them to do that. But we have lots of resources as far as books and other things like that.
That's good to know. There's a team that supports, and you mentioned earlier that the ADM team, the Adult Discipleship Ministry team at our Post Falls campus. But the cool part for our church is we value this at every campus, every one of our Real Life Ministries campuses. And one of the values we have is that there's a support system, there's a coaching system, there's resources. And so wherever they're attending, whatever church they're a part of and leadership they're under, there are resources to be able to take advantage of and to learn from. Anything else, Andy, you would kind of share with a group leader related to this?
Yeah, I would just like to press in that this is a team. You have your own team. You have your own leadership team, right? You've got your co-leader, your apprentice. Your host home is part of that leadership team. So as you're thinking about these stages and seasons, to be including them in that discussion, because they're going to see things that you may not see, and it's not all on you. There's resources equal to you and above you, and we just want you to feel equipped and supported.
Yeah, and I think that's a great reminder of just the relational differences that we have. If I'm thinking of myself, I'm gonna see things from my two eyes. I'm gonna see the perspective of who's around me, which is why for me, my wife is a great blessing and resource to be able to go, that's not what they said in group, right? So that's probably the number one team, right? It's like, if you're married, your spouse would be the first place you go. It's if you're apprentice, your host, your team, you're asking other people, what are you seeing and feeling, and that you're praying about it. You're saying, what season are we going into? What does our group need that we're actually preparing? So this has been super helpful. Thank you guys for just even sharing just a little bit about what you've learned in this topic of different stages, different seasons. Again, some themes that I've heard through this conversation is awareness, intentionality, and then really that conversation that we're praying and preparing for every season that comes at us. So thank you again for being able to join this topic. And we want to thank you leaders for all that you do, the blessing that you are to our church collectively, the discipleship that happens all across our county, the world that takes place. Thank you so much for joining us. For all the different resources and tools, check out realliferesources.org for show notes and other attached resources that we mentioned today in this podcast. We'll see you next time. We are grateful for the investment you make each week as you reach the world for Jesus, one person at a time, and make biblical disciples in relational environments. For notes from this show and other great resources to help you grow, visit realliferesources.org.